Imagine a civilization that stretched over 1 million square kilometers, a territory larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, a society with meticulously planned cities, the world's first sophisticated sanitation systems, and a vibrant culture that thrived for nearly 2,000 years. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, a contemporary of the great empires of the ancient world. But then, around 1900 BCE, something happened. The cities began to empty. The trade routes fell silent. The intricate culture faded. Unlike the fall of Rome, there was no single dramatic event recorded. The Indus Valley Civilization didn't so much fall as it simply disappeared. For centuries, its story was lost, buried under the sands of time. So, what happened? Why did one of the most advanced societies of the ancient world vanish from history? To understand the disappearance, we first need to appreciate what was lost. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization after one of its major cities, was a marvel of urban planning. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were laid out on a precise grid system with wide, straight streets. They built their houses with baked bricks of uniform size, a standardization that speaks to a highly organized central authority. But perhaps their most astonishing achievement was water management. Nearly every house had a bathroom connected to a covered, city-wide drainage system. They had public wells, great baths for ritual purification, and systems to manage both fresh water and wastewater. This was a level of urban sanitation that wouldn't be seen again for thousands of years. They were also master craftsmen and traders. Their seals, carved with intricate animal figures and a still undeciphered script, have been found as far away as Mesopotamia. They worked with copper, bronze, lead, and tin. They created beautiful beads from carnelian and lapis lazuli, and they had a system of weights and measures so consistent it suggests a powerful economic and cultural unity across their vast territory. This was a stable, prosperous, and incredibly sophisticated society, which makes its end all the more puzzling. A civilization this advanced doesn't just collapse without a cause. So, let's examine the prime suspects in this ancient cold case. For a long time, the most popular explanation was one of violent conquest. The Aryan invasion theory, proposed in the early 20th century, pointed to a collection of ancient religious texts known as the Vedas. These texts, composed in Sanskrit, speak of a warlike people, the Aryans, migrating into the Indian subcontinent. The Vedas describe their conflicts with dark-skinned people living in walled cities, whom they defeated. The theory suggested that these invaders, with their horse-drawn chariots and superior military technology, swept down from the north, conquering the peaceful Harappan people, destroying their cities, and imposing their own culture and language. This theory seemed to neatly explain the cultural shift and the abandonment of the major urban centers. However, the invasion theory has crumbled under the weight of modern archaeology. There is a glaring lack of evidence for widespread warfare. The ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro show no signs of large-scale destruction by fire or weapons. There are no mass graves of people killed in battle. Furthermore, the timeline is problematic. The Aryan migration likely occurred centuries after the major cities had already been abandoned. The decline was a process that took place over hundreds of years, not a single catastrophic event. While there may have been incursions and cultural interactions later on, the image of a swift, violent invasion causing the civilization's collapse is now largely dismissed by most scholars. The truth appears to be far more complex, and in many ways, more frightening. If the enemy wasn't an invading army, perhaps it was an even more formidable foe: the environment. The most compelling theory today points to climate change. The Indus Valley Civilization was, as its name suggests, built around a river system, primarily the mighty Indus River and its tributaries, like the Ganga, which many scholars believe is the ancient Saraswati River, mentioned in the Vedas. Their entire agricultural economy, their water supply, their trade routes, everything depended on these rivers. But around 2200 BCE, a dramatic shift began. Paleoclimatologists, scientists who study ancient climates, have found evidence of a mega drought that affected a huge area from the Mediterranean to the Himalayas. Monsoon patterns began to fail. The glaciers in the Himalayas that fed the rivers started to recede. Crucially, the Ganga River system, the lifeblood for hundreds of Harappan settlements, began to dry up. Satellite imagery clearly shows the paleo channels, the ghostly imprint of a once great river running through what is now the Thar Desert. Imagine the slow, creeping horror for the Harappan people. The rains become less reliable. The river levels drop year after year. Crops fail. The water in the public wells turns brackish. The intricate drainage systems become useless because there's no water to carry away. A civilization built on water was dying of thirst. This environmental stress would have shattered their agricultural base, leading to famine, social unrest, and the breakdown of the complex trade networks that held their culture together. The very foundation of their society was literally vanishing beneath their feet. So, did everyone die? This is a common misconception about the collapse of civilizations. The evidence suggests that the people of the Indus Valley did not simply perish. Instead, they likely did what people have always done in the face of adversity. They moved. The story is not one of a sudden extinction, but of a gradual migration and a transformation of their way of life. As the Western heartlands dried up, archaeological evidence shows a dramatic population shift eastward and southward. New, smaller settlements began to appear in the more humid foothills of the Himalayas, in the Gangetic Plain, and in what is now Gujarat. These post-Harappan villages were simpler. They lacked the grand urban planning, the writing system, and the standardized culture of the great cities. This suggests that the central authority, the priests or administrators who coordinated the brick-making, the city planning, the long-distance trade, had lost their power. Without the surplus of a stable agricultural system, society could no longer support such specialization. The people didn't vanish, they decentralized. They became more rural, more localized. They adapted their technologies and their cultures to new environments. Over centuries, their traditions mingled with those of other groups, including the migrating Indo-Aryans. The magnificent urban civilization of the Indus Valley was gone, but its people were very much alive. Their knowledge, their genes, and likely many of their cultural and religious ideas became part of the tapestry of what would later emerge as the great civilizations of the Indian subcontinent. The disappearance of the Harappans was not a death, but a metamorphosis. Today, most historians and archaeologists don't pin the collapse on a single cause. The most likely scenario is a perfect storm of interconnected factors. The primary driver was almost certainly the climate shift that desiccated the river systems. This environmental catastrophe acted as a catalyst, weakening the civilization to the point where other problems became unmanageable. The drought would have crippled agriculture, leading to food shortages and malnutrition. This in turn could have made the population more susceptible to epidemics and diseases. The breakdown of trade would have caused economic collapse, undermining the authority of the ruling class. Social order would have frayed as people competed for dwindling resources. There is even some evidence of increased interpersonal violence in the final phases of Mohenjo-Daro, suggesting a society under immense stress. In this weakened state, even small-scale disruptions could have had catastrophic effects. Incursions by nomadic groups, which would have been easily repelled in the civilization's heyday, could now have posed a serious threat. The civilization didn't have one fatal flaw. It was resilient, but the combination of environmental, economic, and social pressures over 2 centuries was simply too much for its complex structure to bear. It was a slow-motion unraveling, a cascade of failures that ultimately led to the end of its urban character. The Indus Valley Civilization may have vanished as a political and urban entity, but its legacy is profound. The question of what happened to its people and their culture is central to understanding the history of South Asia. While their script remains undeciphered, robbing us of their own voice, archaeological clues suggest continuities. Some of the motifs on the seals, such as figures in yogic postures and reverence for a horned deity, bear a striking resemblance to elements that would later appear in Hinduism. The emphasis on ritual bathing, so evident in the Great Bath, finds a clear echo in Hindu practices today. The long-held idea of a sharp break between the Indus Valley people and the Vedic Aryans is being replaced by a more nuanced model of interaction and assimilation. The descendants of the Harappans, having migrated to new lands, likely gradually merged with other populations over many generations. Their genetic legacy is part of the diverse makeup of modern South Asians. The collapse of their cities was a tragedy, but it was also a transition. It forced a dispersal of people and ideas that fertilized the growth of new cultures across the subcontinent. The story of the Indus Valley is a powerful reminder that civilization is fragile, deeply tied to the environment, and that the end of one world often marks the beginning of another. If you're finding these insights valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel. By hitting that subscribe button, you're not just supporting this work, you're ensuring you don't miss our future videos, where we'll continue to break down complex topics into clear, actionable ideas. Your subscription is the best way to build a library of knowledge together.